Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Roman Rodez Podcast. I'm Rodez.
I'm Roman. Welcome back. Thank you for watching.
And today we will be talking about, I guess you'd say, portrayals of real people in movies.
In movies, yes. Because we had having a little bit of conversation earlier when we were getting something to eat.
To beat. Violence. We needed violence.
I was trying to say a bite to eat and then something to eat at the same time. Anyway, came to my mind. I was thinking about, they were online. They were talking about the new movie I, Tonya, about Tonya Harding.
Yeah.
And how Margot Robbie, the actress who plays Tonya in the movie, she did a really good job, but she brought like all this intensity and this like anger to her portrayal.
Yeah.
And then how in real interviews, footage of the real Tonya Harding, the real Tonya Harding was much more laid back and kind of,
that she portrayed.
Yeah. So they're saying, was this a case of maybe Margot Robbie knows more of how Tonya Harding acted, away from the public eye or whatever, and like how much does an actor bring to portraying someone who's real? Because there's gonna be some conflict, controversy in that. Then I was thinking about how actors sometimes have to portray real people who are long dead.
Tonya Harding is a real people. Oh, long dead.
Long dead. Like this guy, the guy who played he's one of the greatest actors. He played
John Wilkes Booth.
No, played that.
Yes,
that's the actor I'm thinking of.
Right.
Who played Abraham Lincoln, or these actors have to play these people. And it came to mind. I remember there was an actor in Titanic.
Yeah.
I know James.
Transitioning.
Well,
was he in that movie? The guy who played Lincoln?
No.
Okay, you just couldn't remember his name, right?
Remember his name.
I think you're talking about the guy.
It's gonna kill me because he's so famous.
He's super famous, and I know he's known for doing. What do they call it whenever you get into a role? And you start believing it and trying to live your life like that person. Method acting.
He's very.
He's the method actor.
And he just retired supposedly.
Allegedly.
I don't know. Allegedly.
He's the type of person who he tries to live the life of the character that he's becoming. He'll do a bunch of research on that person, then a bunch of research on
Daniel
the era.
Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
The research.
And I know there's a movie called My Left Foot, and it's about a guy.
That's a good movie.
Who has it's a clubfoot,
cerebral palsy.
But basically he's confined to a wheelchair, and he, for a good chunk of the time that he was filming that movie, confined himself actually to a wheelchair and had people push him around, and people were talking about how it was super inconvenient.
Yeah.
But I think didn't you start talking about the Man in the Moon guy?
Yeah, Jim Carrey. Yeah. But let's say on Daniel Day-Lewis for a second.
What?
It's funny because that movie, have you seen My Left Foot?
Yes.
Have you seen the film?
So long ago that I couldn't. It was interesting to me at the time.
It was such an interesting portrayal because it's about a real guy. Christy Brown's his name.
Yeah.
And
they
portray him in the movie pretty realistically in a way. I mean,
who's the guy?
Not just his name's Christy Brown.
Yeah, but what did he do? We know him. How do we know him today?
He was because he did stuff.
What did he do?
I don't know.
The movie was so great. It was so powerful. I loved it. I loved Daniel Day-Lewis's portrayal of it. All right, so what did the character do? Sit in a chair with wheels.
Is, he had a very. It didn't portray him in he was a saint kind of I mean, it would be very easy to do a movie like that where somebody has a disability or some problem, and they're like, oh, but he was a saint,
They should do a movie about an actual saint, and they'd be like, yeah, they didn't just portray him as, well, it's a portrayal of a saint, but to say the metaphor.
But to show him, in his good days and his bad days and everything, So, I mean, it gets kind of tricky when you're portraying somebody real, how real do you want to get,
Okay, so maybe cut to the example. I think it might help people get the idea more of the Titanic. You were giving an example. Titanic, we don't know. Big ship went down.
Yeah, hit an iceberg. So, James Cameron, who directed Titanic, he was known for being, very anal about getting all the details of
he pretty
the Titanic.
Much built a ship.
Yes, he was like, it has to be real. There was a first officer on the real Titanic named William Murdoch. In the film, there is a first officer who they refer to as Murdoch. In the film, Murdoch is helping people get on the lifeboats when the ship's sinking. He takes a bribe from one of the richer. He takes a bribe from one of the people on the boat, and then he feels bad. He accidentally shoots one of the other poorer passengers that's trying to get on a lifeboat.
Did he feel bad about that?
He did feel bad about that. He felt so bad in the
all
movie.
the time. So I'm feeling so bad with all this money and survival.
In the film, he commits suicide, like right in front of everybody. Shoots himself in the head, falls over, and it's like this dramatic moment.
Like on the boat?
Yeah.
Oh, dang.
You remember that part?
No, man. I've never seen Titanic from beginning to end. I've only ever seen it in parts.
It has a bad rap as being like, this romantic thing. It's a really good movie.
I remember liking the beginning. I like they're all at the ship.
Yeah.
I like there's this line, and I'm sure it probably was said at some point. Whenever they're coming up onto the ship.
Yeah.
No, not the cheesy line. Whenever he's coming onto the ship and they're like, have you been checked for lice? Because they're like throwing powder on people. Yes. And he's like, no, we're American. And it's like, that 8 line's not going to age well. And
There's some parts that,
well, it was historically accurate, I guess. Maybe.
I guess so.
But, and then there's also, I loved that scene when it is a cheesy when she goes down to be with, like, has her footloose moment. Goes down to the bottom of the ship. Moment. I know, it was like,
where she's dancing
on her tippity toes. Yeah. That band was really good, though. Yeah, and, like, I could see, like, it is a good movie. The parts that I've seen, I've never not finished it. Because it wasn't good, I've not finished it. So exactly, it is a Titanic venture.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. But okay, so yeah, so he stands up in the boat and is like, I can't. Though I knew. Yeah. I'll finish mine's a little quicker one.
Go ahead.
So there's a character who was very well known. There was a woman who they called her like the unsinkable something.
Oh yeah.
And she was known for like
Brown,
Holly Brown, unsinkable Holly Brown. And in fact, right after this tragedy happened, they pretty much did what they do today. They made movies and books about it.
Yeah.
And one of them was The Unsinkable Molly Brown. It followed mostly her story through it. And I think there was a few people right off the bat who got stories specifically about them and also a story about the whole thing in general. It was, because like the same way we have like the movies about like things that happened in the war, all these natural disaster movies.
Like the 9/11 movies.
Exactly. It's been done since back in the day. But she was known for whenever people were starting to panic on the rescue boats and in general for being a real domineering woman, that she was like calmed everybody down. She stood up on the boat and she like really commanded it. Whether or not that's true, as far as we know, that's everything that was put forth in the historical documents. It might be embellished, but that's what they said. And in the movie, she is not portrayed that way.
Not really.
She is like there, and she seems
comic relief.
She really is. Yeah, and I believe even on the whole thing where her stand up in the boat thing, they like had her quieted down and afraid like everyone else, which she might have been. But to be fair, historically, it said that she was awesome.
Yeah.
And James Cameron turned that down, and so. Yeah. Yours twist was...
So was this thing, it's like, you see this character almost like cowardly, takes a coward's way out because of like everything that's going on, and he killed himself in front of everybody.
Tragedy.
Yeah. And it's a very powerful moment in the movie. However, this guy, he's based on a real guy, William Murdoch.
Daredevil's ancestor.
He could have been. This guy... There's no really record of how he died, but they're pretty sure that's not how he went out.
Because they know it happened 10 years later.
He's really pretty much a Scottish hero. That's what they said in one article that I read about him. And that he was a very professional sailor. They said he was a solid sailor. And that stories about him are that he was the one who helped the most amount of people get on the lifeboats to get off the sinking ship.
To be fair, the stories in England were about the English sailors being the ones to get the most people on. In America, it was about the American sailors having the most people.
But they're pretty sure that the whole bribe thing never happened, that he didn't shoot himself. There are reports of people working on the ship or other people killing themselves on the Titanic.
Oh, really? But
this guy himself, that was never associated with him in the story. In the stories afterward. He has a nephew, Samuel Scott Murdoch.
Good name.
And a lot of people from his hometown who like
that was their hero.
He was like a hero. They
got
complained
Quidditch
about
teams named after him and everything.
Quidditch,
the land of it.
I'm sure. So
it is true that's where that book series comes from. So I'm not wrong. Even
Harry Potter
comes from the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Same. Oh, never mind. Let me not do some conflations.
All right.
Continuing.
So they complained about the whole portrayal of him in the movie. And actually the vice president of 20th Century Fox gave the nephew 5,000 pounds as like compensation for I'm sorry for all the distress that we caused for.
But it was Fox News, so they loaded 5,000 pounds onto a trebuchet and launched it at them. Just bricks right at your face. Because it's like oh we should just use a catapult. They're like, no, we're using the superior siege engine to pay this young man. He's waited too long for his due, and we here at Fox. How that conversation went down. All right, so they compensated the nephew.
Yeah.
For
and there was like a museum who had actually had personal items of his
big
that
deal
they were
then.
putting on. So I mean he was a well-known person, well enough known. And there was one thing they're saying, well, if
none of those artifacts are real.
If
Those
James
are
Cameron
just old.
was looking to do like an actual portrayal of the sinking of the Titanic, and this knowledge is known about this guy doing this and that, why would he change it? If not only for just like, oh, it's dramatic effect, you know?
Maybe. Just maybe. You know, he's a Scottish guy, but he's got like a British ancestor, and there was something. It's just like, you know what? It was like, oh yeah, this great. He's looking through all this great history. He's like, oh, this guy's so good. We got to portray. You know, he always like, you know, left one button unbuttoned to remember him of his childhood days. You know, whenever, you know, he only had one right hand or something. And then he got to this guy, and he's like, don't I have in some family history? There was a man, and our father was poor, and during the Great Potato Famine, we came to Scotland, and they were very rude to us. And it's like, vengeance now. Vengeance now, I'd assassinate your character. Maybe he genuinely disliked the person. But it's basically, and isn't that like a big complaint that they sacrifice reality for the story, but I can
that's
understand
recent enough history to kind of have, you know, written accounts about it. You know, to actually follow what actually happened. What was I getting at?
Like, what are
I was
your
going to say
thoughts on it?
something.
Like, it's a bad thing.
I don't know. I think if I were to produce a film or make a film based on something real, I would try to make it as real as possible. I know that life is yes, exactly. Life can be boring, and you have to embellish some things. You have to change some things. But this seems so like minuscule to actually just say,
because it was because how powerful you said it was. Like, he needed that name in there, you know, because it's historical. I was like, I need just more of a moment, and it's not 100% known how he died. I'm gonna say he died dramatically, tragically, but sadly, and then just people jumped. I can understand that too. I mean,
but
like,
it's almost like a character assassination, you know. Saying
what 100% is a character assassination. He literally had him assassinate himself and be responsible for other people's deaths. So that fits to the T. It is a tough one, though, you know, because you want honesty, but I don't know, maybe you could have substituted a gun to the head with better acting. Nothing against the actor, but just saying, maybe if you could have shot, like, really seen the pain of people watching, and because he did that, people watching this great thing sink, this unsinkable ship, and just emphasize it that way instead of going overboard.
And here's, I guess, an opposite counterpoint to that.
And he already had that whole line going about the heart of the sea jewelry. No, throws the jewelry away like that. Shut up.
She could have sold that and fed small country.
Well, we all know that she is selfish because that door could have fit 11 people.
It's romantic, isn't it? It's the romance of the Titanic.
That was that hidden message, you know. He would have. Was he going through a divorce at the time, James Cameron? I know, like
he met the actress who plays Old Rose's granddaughter. I think Cameron was married to the woman. What's her name from Terminator?
Yeah, Sarah Connor.
Sarah Connor,
actress.
The actress. What's her name?
I don't recall, but I like so basically.
So he was married, and then he met the other actress, and they got married. He's still married to that actress, but it's like his fourth marriage or something.
But like right there, it's like, you know what? Like he was finding reasons to hate his wife. It was just like, oh, you know, man, I bet like if we were in this situation, she wouldn't share the door with me. Like, you know what? You get in the water, Leo. Get in the water. It's like I'm dealing with some stuff now, and there it was.
Well, this is counterpoint to that. There's another movie with I'm blanking on names right now.
It's terrible. Normally you're pretty good with them too.
I know.
Audience disappointed.
Sam Rockwell and Hilary Swank, based on a true story.
Boys Don't Cry?
No, it's not Boys Don't Cry.
Girls Don't Cry?
No, girls do cry. Everybody cries.
officer and a general.
Boys cry and girls cry. Everybody cries.
I remember other movies. The one with the boxing.
It's called.
Well, what happens in it?
Okay, what happens? Based on a true story, where this guy gets arrested for murder, gets sent to prison, convicted.
Okay, I remember. Yeah, because they had him do the cornrows.
Yes.
Okay, that was a big. Yeah, okay.
So then the sister, who hasn't even graduated high school, she goes to get her GED, goes to college, goes to law school, becomes a lawyer in order to free him.
Yeah.
And it turns out this guy is innocent of the crime. And after 20-something years, or a long period of time, she's able to get him out of prison, exonerate him.
Can I do a quick aside on that? A lot of movies like that where it turns out he's innocent and we build through it.
Conviction.
I think it is. You're right. But there's that movie, guy, he played one of the Hulks and he was in Fight Club.
Stone. You're talking about Stone with Edward Norton.
Yes.
And Robert De Niro and Mia Jovovich.
Exactly. Like that one where he was actually... No. It was the one where he was pretending to be crazy.
Oh, you're talking the other one. I'm thinking
he had
the
multiple
other one.
personality.
He had cornrows too or something.
Yeah, he did.
Movie.
But... And also, too, that's what I was thinking.
I remember that movie, but I don't remember the title.
So basically, it's a character about a man who has split personalities, who was convicted for murdering a priest among someone else, but he has this he's a simple mind, but then he has a violent personality, and they really good movie, really dramatic. They go through the whole thing of finding out that he's multiple personalities. We're real big in the late 90s for plot points.
Yeah.
And even though it's considered to not be an actual diagnosis, that nobody really has multiple personalities, although there are personality type disorders where your reactions
dissociative identity disorder.
Exactly, where your reactions are different, but you used to have the same memories well, anyway, without getting into that too much, they do a whole thing where nobody's gonna believe them because it's not true that multiple personalities exist. So they pull this shtick where they basically feed the prosecution a bunch of lines or something that she's gonna use against him, and she starts being super aggressive hostile to him on the stand, and he flips out, and they're like, oh, clearly this is the example of this man being insane and multiple personalities. We're gonna get you to a hospital, get you that help, and you're gonna get out of here. And his lawyer, played by
it's another pretty famous actor.
He's the guy with all the white hair. He's a famous Buddhist.
Richard Gere.
Yeah, Richard Gere's his defense attorney, and he, whenever he goes to tell him that they decided to give him this really light sentence, and the guy's he goes from being all sort of timid to what? Oh man, thanks, this is fantastic. You're a great lawyer. And Richard Gere's character's what? You're not multiple. He's yeah, man, I thought you knew. I thought you, and then he's freaking. Richard Gere's character's freaking out. This is the very, very end of the movie. He's all ashamed and disgusted, and he starts walking down, and the guy is still genuinely happy. He's I'm sorry, I thought you knew.
Yeah.
I thought, and it's I love that movie because it was it was very cheesy and very freaking tropey at the time. All of this stuff I've seen, the whole lawyer,
very
stock, but towards this end, it was so redeeming in that it was no, this is a bad person. He was lying, they actually try to do with this diagnosis, and it was basically he expected more from his lawyer, intelligence-wise, thinking that he actually knew what the law was. Then it's most other movies expect from their audience. It was they expect you oh yeah, this is true, but it's it was a great twist ending to it. Okay. But now that you've corrected me, I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah. And go on, cornrows.
Going back to Conviction, okay, the whole thing was connecting it to the whole thing with Titanic of the real people. So it's based on a true story.
Conviction has the guy who played Green Goblin in it, right?
Green Goblin.
The James Franco?
No.
It's Stone?
I think you are. I don't know.
Okay, we're going.
Hilary Swank and Sam Rockwell.
Okay.
So Sam Rockwell plays the brother. Hilary Swank plays the sister. Mm-hmm. At the end of the movie, I know this is spoiler free. I don't really care about if
you're not gonna watch it. It's a good movie. Spoilers. You could watch it. You'd enjoy it. You'd appreciate it. But it ain't Fast and the Furious fast to space.
He gets freed. And it's a happy ending.
I think it's still recording.
Huh?
Is it still recording?
Yeah, it's just still recording.
Okay.
You want me to check it?
Check it.
All right.
I'm gonna stop for a quick camera check. Also, too, whenever I talk loud, that cymbal shakes.
Still go.
Yeah. Okay. Quick sippy break. Gotta get my sippies. The refreshing taste of Whataburgers. Character assassination portrayals.
Yeah. Okay, so at the end of Conviction, the guy gets free from prison, and then it just says, like it's happily ever after kind of ending. However, in the initial screening, at the end they had a like an dedication to the brother. Mm-hmm. Turns out, since the movie was made, he had passed away.
Oh, sad.
But they decided to take it out because they thought it ruined the happy ending. Oh. Tragically, this guy was freed from prison. He was shown to be innocent of the crime that they were said he did. Man. 6 months, a mere 6 months after being released from prison, he had an accident where he fell, hit his head, ended up passing away from this injury.
Jeez.
And it's kind of horrible. I read this and I was like, it's kind of deflating, like the whole that story that he got out after so many years. And the movie, they decided not to give that information out at the end for fear of ruining the movie's ending. Yeah. So it's kind of like an opposite I see of, kind of like instead of saying the true story, which would be, I think, more, in honor of the real person, they decided to leave this information out. And I know there's several movies.
Well,
even like the movie
that's
Ray.
That's sort of a different spot, I think, because it's like the movie was made and he was alive. If I'm not, was it?
Actually, I think he had already passed away by the time they were going to make the movie.
Well, okay. Well, here's the thing then too. All right, if they passed out before the movie was done, I could see. I think in memoriams are for people who die. Kind of, it's like a current thing. But if you already passed away, I mean, you didn't have a long list of in memoriam. How did I say it? Memoriam of Titanic. They didn't show you the list of all the people that died. A bunch of movies that have people that die, you don't have a huge list. I could kind of see where you might put that in, but at least it's current enough that it's a lot easier to find out when you search it that person has passed. And, you could have still had in memoriam. Because I watched Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus recently, and it had a quick, thanks to it. They didn't put in memoriam then. Maybe there's a different phrasing they could have used that implied like that he had passed.
I think it's like a dedication.
A dedication. That's what it did.
I think that's what they did with the Star Wars movie with Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, I could see that. They should have to acknowledge his passing. I think a dedication might have helped keep the tone and been respectful. But this is backseat director. So other movies?
Well, I was talking about Ray. How Ray, he went through Ray Charles. He went through a really nasty divorce with his wife, and
the whole movie was portraying.
At the end of the movie, there was kind of like, oh yeah, him and his wife divorced, but they're still friends, and the kind of very glossed over
because they were not friends.
Because they went through a lot of crap.
It was the War of the Roses. You remember that movie?
I remember the War of the Roses. Yeah, Danny DeVito.
Good movie. Yeah, great movie. Good movie.
But
Danny DeVito's great in it.
I don't think I've seen War of the Roses, actually. I know the movie, but I don't think I've seen it.
It really shows Danny DeVito has some really solid, serious and dramatic acting chops. Even though his character plays it slightly light, that was one of the few early times I remember. But he's done a few other roles that had hint to that. I mean, even people always bash
Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah. I don't remember him from it.
Him and Christopher Lloyd.
Got super outshined by Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
That I don't remember. But okay, the movie Twins, everybody always mocks it for being sort of, it's weird and very 90s. Everything had to have Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. One of the only scenes from there that I remember is his sort of monologue about, quick little aside. He has a monologue basically that's like they were both like genetically created test tube babies, and so they're brothers. But, he's all short and he got basically he finds out he was the leftover DNA. That's why he doesn't look like Schwarzenegger. And it's like him just sort of having this existential crisis. And it was just really well performed in a pretty light movie. Like comedy overtones. Like check out Danny DeVito's earlier stuff. He's great. It's Always Sunny, but he's a really good actor. And Batman too, obviously he's do that. But check out movies that you don't know him from.
Yeah.
Okay, so other movie. So what was your takeaway from that?
I was talking about When you're approaching a film based on real people, how to approach it. What information do you really need to give the audience who might not know the full story? Somebody who sees the movie about Ray Charles and doesn't read up about it, they're going to say, oh, well, what they showed me was what happened. Or the same movie with the same thing with this movie Conviction. Yeah. They're like, oh, it's such a happy ending and stuff, and then hear the and not know the tragic.
Another thing like Schindler's List.
Yeah.
The Schindler. Oscar Schindler, the Nazi who ended up helping to save a bunch of Jews after the war was over. Basically, he sort of lived destitute. He was real bad with money. He was like homeless a lot, and he literally had to depend on the people whose lives he had saved to sort of have a warm place to stay and for money and for like they kept him alive because the only real reason he got as high up in the Nazi party are in their good graces is because he was a con man and the movie shows that he was like always looking for a loop and taking advantage of things, and at first he didn't care about the Jews at all. He just wanted some cheap labor, but by working with them he saw that there were people, and eventually he listened to his conscience enough to say I have to do something. And well, he did, and he was like, he saved a bunch of people, and he might be responsible for a few 100,000 lives today from their descendants. Mm-hmm. But as soon as everything was over, even though everybody thought he was great, he just couldn't, he didn't. How could I say it? He was always sort of that guy who's looking for the next big thing, and he just didn't know where to put his money. He was gamble, drink. He had a lot of issues, and I guess he was still too feeling guilty about his whole after story is super sad. I don't even want to say dark. It's just sad because this guy just wasn't good at stuff, and he had to deal with demons from the things he did do before he started helping out the Jews. He was responsible for people's deaths and things, and they don't put that in there because it's a dark enough movie. But it makes you wonder. It is a big part of super serious history.
But that's the thing. There's always those stories within the stories that are much more interesting. And
I don't know if I'd say his story is much more interesting than the rest of that movie. Other examples,
but are just as compelling as the stories.
That whole era, the World Wars, has a ton of instances like that where there's historical movies right after. You could basically they start making movies about the wars, like a few of them while they're going on that are mostly propaganda, and even after there's still a lot of propaganda. But you see the same exact stories being told over and over again, and they all have bits of the truth, but the farther away you get from it, it's either glorifying it more or more realistic or more of and it's always too about the perspective, about who's making the movie. A good example would be, you're familiar with the movie Valor? It was played with Tom Cruise, and it's about the Nazi general who was trying to kill Valkyrie. Yes. Yeah, it was based off Project Valkyrie, and he was a high-ranking Nazi who wanted to kill Hitler because he thought Hitler was a bad guy.
Is that the one where nobody has a German accent?
And you know what? I'm not going to bash it because you know why? Because I'd rather hear an American accent. Just act your lines, play it dramatically. If you're bad at the accent, don't do it. It would have been more distracting to me.
It was a little distracting because all the people playing the Nazis weren't German. You had
maybe that was a bit of a commentary.
Tom Cruise, you had Eddie Izzard, you had who are the other guys?
I don't know. It wasn't distracting to me because, like I said, their bad German accents might have been more distracting. I could see how some people complain about. I understand it, but it's like, you know what? I see how hard it is to do accents. I'm not gonna say I do all of it. Whenever I try to do one, I can be real insulting even when I'm not trying to be. So it's like, just do the movie serious and straight and do your best portrayal of it. Well, that particular event was portrayed a lot really quickly, and the first movie I think that was made about it was made in Germany. And like the guys.
So there was other movies based on this event, the Project Valkyrie.
Yeah. Okay. And they were all really serious, and they all take oh man, like they're still good. Like the black and white one that was made in Germany, also super stylish. Like that guy, whenever his character loses an eye, instead of a full patch, they just give him this kind of stylized lens to put there, and super well done and high produced, and just like the drama in it. And his character and the early production is really, he hates the Nazis. He hates everything stands for. He's like, I love Germany, and the Nazis are bad for it. And it was like the way they saw how they wanted to see their hero. But in other movies, his character's a little bit more less involved, and he's more like, I just, this is a bad idea, and, we should take it down so we could be in power. And in Valkyrie, It's Valkyrie, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more, how can I say, toned down as far as like it gets a little bit more into his motivations, and like at first, it's clearly though it's like who knows the true story, but it's all being, you're always seeing it from the perspective of the era, not necessarily the most truthful thing that happened.
Because filmmaking is an art. So I mean, do you think the filmmaker has an obligation in order to present the story in a certain way or as subjective as possible, or do you think that maybe the audience has their own obligations in order to like seek out what is
both? Because there's a thing, I think especially in this era, you should be expected to look into something, to see the validity of it. But as far as saying how obligated it is, I'm hard to say any artist is obligated to do anything with their art. But whenever it's an actual portrayal, that's a lot twistier, man. I think, and that's why they get a big deal about saying this are inspired by events. As
you
opposed
can just
to
get away with just saying inspired,
but maybe emphasize it more and take that into account. Whatever the phrasing is before it, it's like a spell. It's like there's inspired by actual events. There's inspired by the book based on actual events, and there's like all these other little add-ins and addendums, and it's like the phrasing in it. They're there for legal reasons.
Well, okay. Here's an example. Fargo, right? The Coen Brothers movie. At the very beginning of the movie, it says it's based on a true story. Mm-hmm. It's not. Mm-hmm. And they basically just said that as a way to see if they could get away with that. Mm-hmm. And even the actors really didn't know that it wasn't based on a true story. I think the only thing that is true in that movie is that somebody killed somebody with a wood chipper. And just that act.
Even then, I bet you nobody killed anybody with a wood chipper at the time. They killed somebody and then used a wood chipper to dispose of.
Something like that, yeah.
And that's the thing, too. There's based on a true story, based on actual events, which could be totally separate things. Mm. And there's also inspired by actual events. Because I don't remember the phrasing of it. Does it say based on a true
It says
story?
Based on actual events, and then it says something like the names have been changed to protect the innocent. But the events are told as they were to not protect the guilty or something like that. But then it goes into something talking about Nazis.
And that's what drove people in to watch it, because they're like, this is true things based on true things.
And then there, it's I think they took it as kind of a joke and kind of like a marketing tactic. Let's see how many people believe it, because even some of the actors on set, they asked the Coens, "Oh, well, can you tell me the story behind this real event?"
They're like, computers internet wasn't
not real.
And they did. They told them that.
Yeah, they're like, well, it's not real. Mm-hmm. And like this, one of the William H. Macy, I think, was the one who said, "But you can't say it's based on a true story." And they're like, "Why not?"
No. Dun dun dun.
There's a new movie by Quentin Tarantino coming out.
Oh,
based on the Manson murders.
Yes.
We don't really know what the story's gonna be.
Probably about Manson murdering people.
Well, but they don't know if it's
actually murder people, though.
Yeah, but they don't know if it's going to be actually about Manson or if it's just going to be a story revolving around the same time or whatever. But it comes back to something like Quentin Tarantino's movie Inglourious Basterds.
That's right.
Talking about Nazis. Yeah. Where it's like a plot to kill Hitler. Mm. And in this movie, spoilers, they actually succeed.
Yeah.
And they kill Hitler.
Nobody was expecting that, to be fair.
So, something like that, how, as an audience member, knowing Tarantino's past stuff, you can go in and saying, "Oh, well, I know this."
But did it say based on an actual event?
No, it doesn't.
Story?
It doesn't.
Even though,
it has Hitler in it. It has Goebbels, or what's his name?
Goebbels.
Goebbels.
Well, it wasn't the Tom Cruise. I don't know. I get his name mixed up. Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt's character was inspired by an actual.
Is a real guy too.
Yeah, so that would be more. I think it could fit into the term inspired by actual events and people, although not confluence. It's like
but
the people
it's
weren't
not true at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there was a Hitler, there was this guy, and this World War did happen, but not like this.
So I mean, let's say
it's like if
I'm pretty sure people who've seen the movie, they know what happened. Say 50 years from now, 60 years from now, 100 years from now, the next generation,
Star Trek
members,
people,
yeah. If they don't know all the details really about World War II and what happened, and they see this movie,
how much will they interpret?
How will they interpret
a change
to say,
infected?
This
is something we shouldn't go to war with each other.
Will they be seeing Inglourious Basterds like we watch Schindler's List?
Yeah, like just taking it way too serious and saying like we know they took liberties, but how many? So, or just to that, I have to pivot back to that phrase.
Go ahead.
Based on actual events and people, legally with that movie, I could then have, Abraham Lincoln, charging the beaches of Normandy, during the recession in 2008. All actual events, all actual people. It didn't happen that way though. But true. That's a true statement.
Yeah, that is.
Right. Okay. Another one would be the modern stuff. Basically, a lot of stuff that what's his name? The guy from Ted.
Seth MacFarlane?
No, the main actor. He's
Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. How did I forget? None of us are really good with the names right now. Marky Mark. That song was good. He was good. I thought he sounded awesome. He's in a lot of the movies that are. It's like he's on that oil rig that blew up. Off the coast.
Yeah. He's doing those movies with the same director.
Exactly, and they're all
Peter
based
Berg.
off of actual events.
Mm-hmm.
And
Patriots Day was the recent one, right?
The most recent, yes. And is that the one that came up?
That's the one about the Boston bombing.
Oh, okay. That one was a little bit older. That was I think one of the first ones. The oil one is the most recent one that
Lone Survivor was the other one with the
military. Yeah, that one I think was before the Boston.
That was the first one they did.
Yeah, and then the most recent one is about the.
Was it about the oil
off the coast? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That happened off the coast of in the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
And then there was like too much pressure built up, and it was like the worst natural disaster until like 3 weeks ago. That had happened with oil. It was a bunch of pressure, and clearly they dramatize a ton of stuff. The action, usually if it's like super action packed, for the most part, it's overdrawn. Now there are some people who died really dramatic, terrible deaths. They're like saving lives, but they have to overemphasize it to make it, more watchable. Because sometimes in order to get people to feel even similar, like awe or sorrow for a real event, you have to over dramatize it in the fiction, I think. And so I could sort of see that you're trying to make people sympathetic. And in fact, I think the most recent movie like that coming out now is about a train in Europe that there's a terrorist on.
Yeah. And that they got, it was a terrorist attack on a train in Paris, right?
And there happened to be a guy who was a veteran on there.
Yeah.
And he was able to disarm him.
There was 3 guys who were able to stop it.
It was a real quick event. It's going to be a whole long movie.
Yeah, and Clint Eastwood's directing the movie. The actual guys who stopped it, he hired them to play themselves.
Oh, really? Well,
so that's another twist.
Cool. That's pretty cool. I like it when they do that.
So that's another thing.
I like it when they do that. I'm gonna enjoy. I'll check that one out now. I did not know that and was probably not gonna watch it before. Good job, Clint Eastwood. You have got my ticket.
Well, the one thing, then we got to see. Okay, well, how well can these guys act, and like, what are they? It would be interesting to see the behind the scenes stuff on something like that.
I'm gonna say a little bit of no, because especially in action movies, and now it might be an action drama, you give a little bit more leeway with bad acting, and also too you're trading off authenticity for star power. So I'm gonna give them a little bit of more credence for that.
I know. Talking about people portraying themselves in movies, I was reading about
what is it, the Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah.
The sniper who portrayed himself in the movie in the event is based on an American sniper who did a similar thing.
Really?
He was this real little guy. He took out a bunch of Nazis from like one position. He held it for a long time. Got like the Medal of Honor, a bunch of other badges. And he also portrayed himself in a movie about that event.
Was it Audie Murphy?
I wouldn't know. I don't remember.
I think Audie Murphy was an actual...
And I've heard it was a pretty decent movie, too. He was actually turned out to be a pretty good actor.
That Audie Murphy was served in the war, and then he came back and then became an actor and did a whole bunch of war movies. Mm-hmm. I think that's him. I don't know if it's the same guy you're talking about, but I know Audie Murphy. I think
I just said it's like it happened.
Yeah.
Actual event.
But I was reading... I guess it kind of hits on some of it. Howard Stern portrayed himself in the movie. Private Parts about himself. And Paul Giamatti's in that movie. Played a guy named Pig Vomit. And
he's Pig Vomit.
I think it's Paul Giamatti. But that character is an amalgamation of different real people.
Don't they do that? They do that in a lot of movies. They amalgam basically they take a bunch of events that a bunch of different people did, put them all together to one person for storyline. That also happens.
Usually mostly they're a sidekick kind of character, right?
Yeah, usually because it's like you're trying to tell one main story a guy who had a lot of interesting things happen to, but if he's having these interactions with different people, that's extra actors you got to pay, that's extra story, and you're not as invested whenever like one character randomly dies who helped him out once. It's like, I don't care. But if it was the guy who was a sidekick the whole time, then you feel for it. The example I would use for that would be Dallas Buyers Club, where
that's right.
Yeah,
Jared Leto's character
is an amalgam of a whole bunch of people, and he has a very tragic backstory. When in fact, what happened was there are some people who had a tragic ending and tragic backstory. There's others who didn't, and it put it together to make one super dramatic, interesting character. Whereas before, they still might have been those dramatic, interesting people, but you wouldn't have seen it from that character's perspective in the time they had.
I think it's just to make the story flow better.
Exactly, and I can understand it. But I could also imagine, too, having a key moment and a time in history, and then seeing that action portrayed by somebody who's like, nothing at all like you, and it's because they're doing all these other things. Like you, and someone else, we do something really dramatic and interesting, and they turn all three of us into one person and give us like fragment names or none of our names. It's like the story still happens the same way, but for us, I'd feel pretty betrayed and hurt. Not happy.
I remember seeing a interview with Tom Hanks, because Tom Hanks has played several real people.
That's like his thing now.
And he's going to portray Mr. Rogers in a biopic.
Lovely. I'm going to bring a soft blanket to that and a warm glass of milk.
And I think he said that when he was portraying the
was the captain?
The captain.
Yeah,
not the captain. The plane
captain.
The plane captain. The pilot. Sully.
He's a captain.
He's a
lot.
captain.
What was it? Was it the movie where he's a soldier captain? Think about
which
it.
One?
The one with Vin Diesel.
Saving
Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, but he was a captain.
Captain Phillips.
He's Captain Phelps, man.
Sully, he's a captain of the. But basically, he met with the real guy, and said, "My job, I've been hired to portray you. But I'm gonna do things that you didn't do. I'm gonna say things you've never said, and I'm gonna be places you never were. But my job is to do it. But other than that, I have to be 100% you," or something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
That's the best way that's ever been. That sounds. Of course, he would be the one to say.
He would be the one to say something like that. So, I guess.
Oh, where are you going?
That got me thinking about.
I like that he was at least upfront with the guy at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like if maybe the actor who came to portray us in that imaginary scenario came up and said, I respect what you guys did. I appreciate the things you've done, but I'm going to get to know a little bit of both of you to try and make it into a character. I think maybe not be as happy as if it was just me being portrayed, but it's like I could understand that. Like treat me like a person and treat me better than a person. Treat me like a famous person.
Do you think if this new Eastwood movie does really well, we'll see more stories like this where they get the real people?
Are forever. That's the thing. There's a Titanic. It's been back since the Titanic.
No, but getting the real people to portray themselves
in crazy events. Okay, then yeah. And I'm going to say also,
that might be like a thing.
That's a little bit of also too. That also happened with the Titanic movies. People portrayed themselves. Look it up. Yeah, they already did that too. They had at the time there was not as many actors. They did that with the that war story we were talking about. That was No, though, seeing it a lot more, we'll have to see. We'll see. I hope not, though, because that means there's more tragedies. Like, there's not going to be any, rising star moments. So you're not going to watch, I don't know, are they going to do any football movies where they, this guy, someone who was, had a lot of struggles through their life? Are they going to portray themselves through the whole movie? I doubt it. They're only going to do that with sad stories.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, more than likely.
Sad. Maybe action movies. Maybe a few action movies. That would be cool to see. Oh, so it's 2018 now, and SpaceX. So here's my thought: we could finally see movies actually filmed in space.
Well,
But let me tie off my thought though. Okay, and we were going to tie into talking about westerns in a bit, about their always our portrayal of what cowboys were really like, and especially the way we sort of glorify the criminals back then. The law from back in the day would not be happy about that. They were bad people. They killed people for money. But a lot of westerns filmed in the desert because that's what we say the Old West looked like, but most of them was probably towns that had trees around it. They looked pleasant. It's just easier to film out there, make it look older.
That authentic when it came down to
exactly. Our interpretation of what the Wild West was like was what Hollywood had available at the time to make a whole bunch of westerns. But out in the desert is also where they film a lot of sci-fi movies, a lot of outer space movies to show it's usually Mars, but there's other alien worlds. So my thought being is that at some point will we be on an alien world, particularly Mars, filming using the Mars background to film a western. Well, that would be awesome.
Oh, to film a western. Yeah.
It's like, okay, these mountains kind of look like this California Valley. And I was like, doesn't it look like Earth? And it's all like, everything's kind of got that red tint. It's like, I'll just put on blue tint. That's what it's like on Earth. Why do you keep waving your arms? That's what Earth things do. I'm pretty sure they don't. Gary, you moved here 5 years from Atlanta. Yes, the lost city of Atlanta. We're not friends. We're not friends anymore. Gary.
Well, I was gonna say, Star Wars Episode 9, the one they're prepping, the new Star Wars movie is gonna come out next year. Colin Trevorrow, the original director, his intention.
There's gonna be Star Wars. The series is gonna go on for so long. Star Wars and filmed in space.
Well, his whole idea was he was gonna film a background plate in space. So just get NASA or whoever to send a camera out in space.
I was gonna say, or whoever. It's just like the fact
Elon Musk or
I was gonna say,
SpaceX
there's a lot of options now. It's gonna get Russia, China, one of the other.
He was gonna get the cheapest probably to film.
Take a picture of
to get footage out in space and then use that as the background plates for all the spaceships. And he was gonna do it in with IMAX cameras, so to look massive. Well, he's since been fired from the project. Aww. I don't know if J.J. Abrams but that's for the better. That's for the better. That's for the better.
Oh wow! Okay. Outer space.
So now J.J. Abrams coming back. So I mean that would be something that I would love for him to keep.
Yeah.
To say just to see how it would, if it would make any difference.
I have a thought. My thought is every scene filmed at night is filmed in space. There's just a little bit of thin layer of gas between you and the vacuum of the void. Don't think about every time you have a picture of the stars, that's outer space.
Yeah.
Just because it's like we have air above us, it's like there's no hard shell protecting us from it. Think about it. Think about how we're on the cusp of existence. But I'd like to see that too. I mean, like I said, I'm kind of a sucker for, that was authentic. I'd like the authenticities. Like movies filmed actually in subs. Was it Das Boot?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was
in a submarine.
Filming under the ocean.
Yeah, man, that's intense. And it's like I feel like I've seen only a few. I think that's another one I probably saw when I was younger, and subtitles were not my thing, but super intense, man. It's like you feel it. They feel that claustrophobia, man. Mm-hmm. And especially pretty much any movie filmed about a story in a submarine, they're gonna have closed, cramped quarters, and you can feel the tension. I've yet to see a bad submarine movie.
You've seen 127 Hours, right? James Franco? No,
because I read the title.
Okay.
And I saw the cover photo, and I was like, I feel like I've watched the whole thing.
It's the story of a real true story. Keep in line with true stories about a guy who was hiking out in, I don't know if Arizona or where, but he fell down this canyon. A rock pinned his arm.
It says canyon. He fell down a crevasse. He fell down. That's what it was.
Yeah. And his arm got pinned by a rock. He had to actually amputate his own arm in order to survive. And it's an intense movie. I'm not quite sure I like the film, but the story itself was pretty intense and pretty powerful. But when the director, when he was going to make that movie, they built on a stage a set of the crevice of the canyon where the guy was trapped. But he said that mostly when they build stages, they build it in kind of tearaway parts. So in case you need to get the camera in a certain angle, they can move a piece here and there. He decided not to do that. He told him to build it like a solid set, as though they were in an actual canyon, in order just to intensify their experience and get the actor James Franco like I guess the claustrophobia.
I thought you were gonna say, I guess if they had a better actor, they wouldn't have had to do that.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure another director would do that.
I like
but
James Franco.
That's trying to get, that much closer to reality.
Back to reality. So, do you think it helped?
Probably.
Don't think it mattered. I have to say, man, okay, and I'm not knocking that technique. Yeah. I'm knocking that technique in that movie, in that story. Yeah. Okay, I'm just, what can I say? I don't know. Any other examples or stuff? So, there's a lot to take away from it. And I guess the big thing would just be try to, if you're really taking a lot out of a movie, if you really like it, appreciate it, and sometimes looking into the backstory can be really bad. Sometimes it can be really good. There's been a few times where I've read, and it was mostly stuff out in World War II, where I decided to look up about the movie, and then I clicked on the link of a name, and these guys just have like huge, fascinating stories. So sometimes it's good. Sometimes. Yeah. I'm thinking of an example where it's bad and I kind of don't want to. It's like when it turns out the person was a jerk and a horrible person.
That's the thing too. I heard a lot of stories, where it's like it's a hopeful story, and then it's like, well, it didn't really actually happen like that, or that person said this or that. Or
how many people were like, Edison's such a great guy, and then it just became popular knowledge that he was a terrible jerk. And even Nikola Tesla can be hard to sympathize with if you know the true story behind him, because he was just kind of a weirdo. You can feel bad about it, but he's was weirdly obsessed with pigeons, which might have been a part of a personality disorder. I cannot do you want to know?
Sure,
we got some time. So apparently he just took it up as a bit of a hobby. He would open pigeons, and then people do that as a hobby. But he literally he had trouble. I guess he didn't trust women. He thought they were kind of filthy and gross, and he had one particular pigeon that he loved, just without making it like a beloved pet, but super he loved it like a beloved pet that a super old lady who grew up like this thing. He just had super intense bond with this one pigeon, and one day it died. And he mourned for weeks. I don't want to read too much in the story, but look up Nikola Tesla and pigeons and get ready for a wild ride. I might bring up the full story just to give it the true, some depth to it. But he had a lot of weird little things, and that was the biggest one I could think of. Also, a huge germaphobe. He didn't like shaking hands, or as soon as he did, he'd be back to cleaning it. They were, human. We're all human. I'm kind of bashing him a bit, but it's he was a weird person. And Abraham Lincoln apparently had a squeaky voice. The descriptions of it.
That was one of the things of the voice when Daniel Day-Lewis portrayed him, that he had a weird voice, and he was like, well, that's what... I think even with Mozart, the whole laugh that he had, was it's pretty accurate.
That's how he was. And too, going farther in time of portrayals of real people, the portrait of Washington crossing the Delaware. A lot of people already probably know this because it's been coming out, because that was such a famous image that people eventually started tearing it apart, saying that's not the right kind. There was more boats, and there was different kind of people, and there was I think a lot of people who stormed that I don't know if you say beach or bank, but crossing over were black. They were that. There was a big chunk of a regiment that helped take out the Germans, and that were black. And also to George Washington, anyone who's been in a boat. And just showing, I had never been in a boat, and I chose to stand up in one. And you know what happens when you stand up in a boat that's really like a small canoe? You stop standing. Exactly. you can't. You find out. Exactly. So as great as that picture is, that is a great looking picture. He's standing up proud. And in fact,
it's so iconic that actually there's a recent Geico commercial that has...
Yeah. It's funny crossing the Delaware Turnpike.
But you see that image and you're that image already with him just at the front of the boat
When in fact it was cold. They're getting ready. He would have been in the back of the boat, because who was at the front of the boat? The person captaining it, steering it across and guiding, which he didn't do. He had a lot of skills. He was not a maritimer. He had a great plan. That was a pivotal battle, but it's that's not how it went down. And I'm not gonna bash anybody who has a picture of it because it looks great and it sets off the room, I'm not taking anything away from the moment. It adds more to me for it, but if you don't want to know, all the meh.
I remember there was a girl once in high school where she was talking about conspiracies that we talked about in the last episode. all those conspiracies about the painting of the Last Supper.
Oh,
And she's like,
yeah.
this and that. And then our teacher was like, just told her, well, the guy who painted that wasn't there, so it's just like a representation. You know, so I guess it kind of made me think, okay, you know, most of the stuff we see, images we see, even though it's based on something tangible or real, you have to see it with kind of that, okay, the artist, there's like a film that the artist puts over
nobody
cover
sits like that. Nobody sits like that. Yeah, I mean, what were they just like staring down everybody on the other side of the restaurant, or like, you know? And it's like, too, all the exact positioning, and I don't even think they had the food right and stuff that they would have had. They added like a feast when it's like pretty much everything that was brought up, wine bread was wine. What was likely there. And like you said, artist interpretation.
And actually, talking about artist interpretation, you're familiar with. I think this is a topic that I wanted to go deeper into in another podcast or another video.
The one we're going into now, or you're about to bring
right now? I'm just going to bring it up really briefly about the film Nacho Libre. You've seen Nacho Libre, right?
Several times.
That's another one that's inspired by a true story.
Oh, yeah.
And I had heard about it when it came out. I remember they said, it's based on a real priest who was a luchador.
I've heard that story
in
other movies and shorts and cartoons before of a priest who becomes a wrestler.
Yeah. I looked up the real story. It's such a dramatic and like gut-wrenching story that I don't know how the director decided, it's going to be a silly comedy with Jack Black in it.
You know the thing, though? Every portrayal I've seen of that story has been like that.
Really?
I saw an anime. It was no dialogue, and it was just, about, this guy. I don't think he was a monk, though. But it was for like a religious or priest. Yeah, but in the anime, it's like clearly it's that getting that story from it. He's trying to save the orphanage.
Yeah.
And it's because they do that story a lot, and I think it's mostly taken from that event. But it's usually taken a light side.
It's one of those stock stories that it starts from one.
I think Here Comes the Bang is
origin.
like inspired by that, even if it doesn't say it is. The idea of like fighting to save like little kids, programs or whatever.
And the woman, it's one of those kind of stories that kind of becomes a classic or kind of comes like a staple of, it's just a
trope.
A trope. That's the word I was looking for. But I mean, this story of the priest, man, he was a drug addict before he became a priest.
Oh,
and he like confined himself to a bed in order to get clean.
Man, kind of like Train Spotting.
Yeah. Whoa. And then because he saw an image, he went to mass, saw himself as the priest, like this vision. Got clean, became the priest.
Wow. And
even during the whole, becoming a luchador and stuff, he had a lot of trouble in his life.
You know what? Yeah, let's do another episode about this. Bring
and
me
it's
up
funny,
on it.
like that would have been a movie like, hey, let's get Daniel Day-Lewis to play him or somebody like that. And they're like,
he'd get in
Jack Black.
Yeah. You know what? Though? Here's the thing, though, is Jack Black, I think, could do that same portrayal seriously. That's another one too who does. People don't give the credit for having serious, dramatic acting shots.
Well, talking about Jack Black, there's a new movie on Netflix called The Polka King. I don't know if you've seen it.
I'm not.
Based on a true story. Based on a true story of a guy who basically, this Polish guy came to America, got a polka band, and he became pretty famous. And then he ran a Ponzi scheme.
Oh, I like it already.
And stole a whole bunch of money from these old folks. Ooh. There's another movie called Bernie with Jack Black where he plays a real guy.
Bernie Sanders?
No, not Bernie Sanders. Or not Bernie Madoff. It was another guy. It took place here in Texas. He murdered this old woman that he was taking care of.
I've watched that one.
See, that's the type of real movie that you want to put Jack Black in.
He is magnificent in that movie.
The Polka King is a little more. The Polka King's a little more light and kind of comedy-ish, but he's solid in that. He's really good.
Oh yeah, definitely. We need to check that
so
out.
I'd recommend that one.
You know what? Yeah, let's. If you guys are, whether you're interested or not, nobody's really talking to us right now. We're gonna do that. Let's make that the next podcast.
All right.
Get a little deep into it. You cover the true story, and I will do my best to find other adaptations of it.
There we go. We got
just so
podcast.
You know what's coming up, guys.
Yeah.
That. Hope you enjoy, and we will be coming back to you. Tie up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Next time you see us. Once again, thank you. This is Roman Rodez Podcast.
Yes.
Remember, Roman Rodez, Rodez. And you can find us on
Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, here on YouTube, on Instagram,
SoundCloud.
And SoundCloud. Yes, that's the fifth one. So just search Roman and Rodez. Again, that's Rodez for Rodez.
And
Roman Rodez.
There's no.
There's no end.
Do both.
There's no end.
It's Roman Rodez. And check us. Also, like, please, share, pleaser, comments if you want any other topics.
Let us know what you like from our content.
No, this is my thing. You put your hands to your side, sir.
All right.
But yeah, what he said. Check us out. We appreciate the view. Catch you next time.
Thank you.
But mostly catch you next time.